I'm Carl, and you're watching the Coffee Boiling Channel.
And I know I haven't done this in quite a while now, so I'm gonna do it now. We are back to how to bowl on a pattern, but we got Dragon today. So Dragon's an interesting pattern, and I'm gonna do this video a little bit differently than I did the last couple how to bowl ons. I'm just gonna do, fresh, transition, and the burn. So first off, let's understand what this pattern is like. So Dragon is 45 feet. And it's interesting because what's different about Dragon is different about Shark is that Shark obviously 3 feet longer, but the shape is in the middle of the lane. Whereas Dragon, you have a little bit of shape towards the second arrow where that's like no man's land on Shark. So it's interesting. It's pretty flat in the middle from about 12 to 12, and then it starts to taper out. But you find a lot of potential hook in between, 12 to 8 zone. You can kind of start out there and kind of wear the pattern out, and you can really bump it off of that, which isn't really something you do on a long pattern all the time. But it's interesting. So I'm going to get into, the angles, the types of balls, and everything you need to know about the Dragon pattern to have some success, or at least try to. Well, first off, I'm going to start with kind of like what bowling balls I used and what bowling balls will work, what to look for. I'm not going to say specific names and brands other than what I actually used, but because I don't really think you should be going for a specific name and a specific brand. You should be paying attention to the cover stock and the cores. Okay, all that nerdy stuff aside, what I used was the Omega Crux, the 2 Kinetic Obsidians, a High Road, and a High Road Pearl. Now, I generally like to have a strong symmetric, and obviously that was not mentioned. So the core numbers I'm looking for, especially on the fresh, is a 248, 252 kind of RG, and anywhere from like an 030 to 050 differential. Mainly, 030 for the higher lane friction surfaces, and then 050 for these lane surfaces that are a little bit newer that don't, hook quite as much. Now, something for me that I like to see out of these bowling balls is I like to see my ball get down lane, not necessarily curve super hard, but show me that look where you have a little bit of hook to the right, and a good amount of hold to the left. You want to see your ball get down lane and just kind of stay in the pocket. Because on these types of patterns, I'm not really going to throw it away from the head pin nearly as much as I would on something a lot shorter. So with that being said, I kept on the fresh. I grooved out the second arrow, and a lot of the shape on this pattern is anywhere from like 12 to 8. That's where you're going to see the flattest part, go all the way down to the lowest level of concentration of oil. So once I did that, I kind of broke it down, and as I started the game, I noticed that I moved left almost immediately, and I got into about 15 to 17 to 20 at the arrows, and I made sure to keep my angles right at the 3-pin. So I generally used about 15 to 20 at the arrows, but I kept my break point anywhere from 15 to 10. Now it's at a slight angle, it's not throwing it really far away from me, so I was able to create a really good look where I was able to just kind of roll my ball off my hand, getting end over end with the Omega Crux and my early drilled Kinetic Obsidian. And what that did for me, it gave me a lot of carry, a lot of driving through the pins, but it didn't force me super far left. I didn't feel like I had to play in the flattest part of the lane immediately. And that's why I go with a stronger ball, because they're not gonna save too much energy and be super crazy down lane. Now, if the front part of the lane is just super burnt up already, like you're just in a high friction lane surface, you can start with a little bit weaker ball. But what you want to do is you don't want to play the flattest part of the lane right off the bat. You want to wait for that flat part of the lane to be cut out a little bit through a lot of ball tracks going down the lane. So on the fresh, pretty much, get your earlier bowling ball. Don't necessarily look for the ball that's your down lane reaction. Look for something mid lane and smooth. I wouldn't go lower than 1,000 grit, especially on the higher friction lane surfaces, but I was able to stick with about 1,000 to 2,000 in my hands, and that allowed me to not really have to worry about my ball not hooking. So I mentioned, what kind of balls and what kind of cores and cover stocks were good for the fresh, which was, your hybrids and dull shell solids. So for the transition, what is transition? Transition is when oil starts to be taken off the lane and you find yourself having to move, meaning like, what you started with right out of the gate all of a sudden isn't working anymore. So what I noticed on this pattern was I didn't have to start throwing my ball further right or further left. I could keep the same break point no matter how far left I got with my feet. And I noticed that I could just incrementally keep inching left and further left with my feet. But the type of ball that I had to throw in order to retain length and being able to just kind of throw it towards the 3-pin and keep it in front of me most of the time became weaker. Like I had to go to my Kinetic Obsidian with the weaker layout on it, with the flare rings really, really tight so the ball didn't want to overread the front part of the lane. And I also noticed that I had to give it a little bit of loft over the front part of the lane as well, just because the front part of the lane started hooking so early that it wasn't allowing my ball to see the length of the pattern. So with that being said, I was able to create a little more angle into the 3-pin opposed to when I was standing right in front of the 3-pin. So as the pattern breaks down, you get a little bit further left. You don't have to get crazy, but you can still keep throwing it, not at the pocket, but the face of the 3-pin. And as long as you're not getting any like going too crazy with like super fast ball speed or super slow ball speed, you should see your ball get down lane pretty effortlessly. And if it's not the fresh anymore, and you are on, you're on transition, there's a lot of people on your pair, or there's a lot of people, games being thrown, and there's people left of you and stuff like that, and you're seeing it get dry quickly, definitely do not be afraid to throw the weaker ball on this pattern. Even though you may think, oh, it's a long pattern, I probably shouldn't use a pearl ball. Well, you can. I'm here to tell you can, and I'll show it in my video. So I was actually able to go to a weaker ball and not necessarily need a strong symmetric ball in my hands for this pattern, just because of, one, I was bowling by myself, and two, it was actually able to get dry enough to the point where the weaker ball was actually needed. Like it wasn't just skidding super far down lane, it was actually reading the mid lane and retaining energy and going to the pins really well. So once I started to see a lot of breakdown on this pattern, I was able to go to like the high road, which I still consider this into the transition phase of the pattern, because at this point, after the fresh, I was probably like 20 to 25 at the arrows, and I was like in that section, between the 4th and the 5th arrow, and the only reason for getting even far left like that was to find more head oil, which allowed my ball to slide. And again, this is something that I always look for on long patterns, is I want to get my ball to go as far down lane as possible, but to show length. Like I want to be able to miss left off my hand and have the ball just stay on the right side of the head pin. So if you're bowling and you feel like, you're just being forced further and further left, and you're not really getting any kind of length out of your, out of your ball, it could be a couple of things. One, the ball's reading too early. Two, it could just be the wrong ball in general. And then three, could be your ball roll. Like if you're getting too up the back of it, your ball isn't going to just lay in front of the head pin. Sometimes a little bit of rotation on these patterns is good, though you may have to slow your ball speed down a little bit to allow the ball to read still. Burn on this pattern is kind of tricky. I noticed that it definitely took a really weak bowling ball, or really shiny ball at least, in order to provide the right length and not see my ball hook too early. There's a lot of early hook at this point. Once I got super far left, mainly into the 5th arrow and maybe even further, you'll see I used the high road, the weakly drilled Kinetic Obsidian, and the high road pearl. Now these are the Kinetic Obsidian drilled for length, and my high road and high road pearl are probably 2 of the weakest, or 3 of the weakest balls I even own. And I mean, these balls are just a ton of length. And I found that at first it was kind of hard to get them to carry. And once I kind of just slowed the ball down enough for it to go through the pins, I noticed that those balls were the better option over the stronger balls, because one, I didn't have to get even further left into like a weird uncomfortable zone, because I still needed to keep it in front of me, and it just gave me more room throwing the weaker ball. I could miss a little further left, I'd still have that slide to the head pin, and if I missed right, it would recover because it's saving a ton of energy, whereas these stronger balls like the Omega Crux is gonna, you know, hit the lane at that point and just, you know, the cores is gonna turn over immediately and you're not gonna see the length that you need to have. So on the burn, you can get a little trickier. You can kind of throw the ball away from you a little bit more at this point, but you still want to be throwing it into the 3-pin. And the general consensus is I go weaker ball, slower ball speed, but softer with my hand to allow the ball to, one, not save too much energy and overreact and, like, you know, jerk through the pocket too hard, but I wanted the ball to still read the mid lane and retain a smooth shape. So there is no point on this pattern where I look for my ball to just, you know, hockey stick down lane, because on this kind of pattern, even on the burn, I'm not trying to cover a lot of boards. You know, like my ball really isn't going out past in between the 3 and the 6 pin. So you do not have to hook it nearly as much as you think you do it. And then also some hand positions that I found to be very useful were not like super up the back of it, but not super rounded, that kind of middle of the road hand position where it's a little bit of side roll and a little bit up the back of it, but also a little on the around it side. You know, it's not super one way, just kind of in between around it and up the back of it. But the bowling ball cores and cover stocks that work good for the burn are at this point you want a higher RG, like a 255 and higher. Like the high roads were 257, and I noticed the differential on the balls that worked really good on the burn were around 030 to 040. So I was able to throw a little bit weaker core, but with a higher RG allowed me to keep the shape that I wanted to. And you'll see it in the video. Like, you're going to see the high roads, they're going to go down lane. You'll notice that they're not even really going much further right than the head pin, but it's the length that you're seeing that really allows you to get that look out of the ball. Quick recap on the fresh: you want to be a little bit straighter. You want to keep your angles in front of you. You don't really want to throw the ball away from the 3-pin a whole lot. You can use, you know, break points of anywhere from like 15 to 12-ish in that zone. You can get a little bit right, a little bit left of that. Overall, you do not need a whole lot of surface, maybe like 2,000 to 1,000 on your dullest ball. And then you can start out with a really strong ball, high flaring ball, but then as they break down, you definitely want to go to something weaker. Slowing your ball speed down does help get to the pins on this pattern. So if you find yourself, yeah, I can hit the pocket all day, but I can't, you know, get that pesky 10-pin or 7-pin out of the rack, try slowing your ball speed down. Give it more time to hook, because you are on 45 feet of oil, and that is pretty long. So if you like this video, let me know in the comments. If I did a horrible job, you can let me know too, because either way, I love hearing from you guys. It helps me be better teacher and I can help you guys even more by knowing what you guys want to see out of these videos, and I'm really doing it for you guys. So with that being said, What's the next pattern you guys want to see?